Hi all, I am Akhil. I am the Managing Director of Nth Exception. We are experts in ISO 2022. We primarily work with any fintech. We work with financial institutions across the world of any size, including central banks. To simplify their ISO journey, we have a product set for it, and we also provide consulting services for it. We are based out of London and Dubai as well.
Perfect, guys. So this is not a live show, actually. This is just recording our meeting today. Great pleasure to welcome to BSCA Europe. A good friend of mine, Akhil Rao from India, is an expert in the payment space. This follows up to say what we're trying to do with BSCA in terms of digital innovation, digitalization, digital transformation. There are many terms defined, and we're following the pathway into supply chain, into sustainability, and now also in payments. So a while ago, I asked Akhil for his availability on one main thing to be recording, to be live cast later on, and he accepted, luckily, because he's going to talk about ISO 20022, just the introductory meeting. And let's see how it goes. I mean, glad to share his insights with the community. So I wouldn't like to waste too much time. By the way, thanks for joining us, Rick. Thanks for joining us, Ayhan. Welcome to this, let's call it experiment. And I leave the stage to you, Akhil. Thanks for joining us, by the way. Thanks for sharing your expertise with us. And more of this, luckily, hopefully in the future. Akhil, stage is yours. We're listening to you.
Thank you, Andrea. So, as we all know, the financial industry is undergoing a massive change in terms of messaging standards. So when we say messaging standards, it is what does the messaging standard actually do, and where does it actually fit in? Because a lot of people actually do not see the standard in the front, right? A lot of people in the world may have come across different standards. It can be anything like the Swift MT, or it can be any of the proprietary message standards that the country uses or the central bank uses of that particular country. So, and this can be anywhere between 35 to 40 years old that we are talking about, right? So, but when we look at the technological advances that the industry has made over a period of time, the older languages do not fit in anymore. And this is purely because of the data that comes in as part of the ISO 2022 messages, which was never available to the financial institutions till now. And that is what the banks are striving for, financial institutions are striving for, and market infrastructures are pushing for. So what is the whole need around it? Why is the push? What is the language? And how are we solving the challenges around the adoption is what we are going to look at over the next couple of minutes. Okay. So when you look at the payments and global trade, how does it impact? Why is it so important that trade and payments work so closely? So when we look at the cross-border payments and the global trade, according to a recent review, as you can see on my screen, in fact, is the retail and the wholesale market, according to Bank of England, is just it's actually expected to grow over trillions by 2027, and this is possible only if we have payments that are faster, that are interoperable, and that is the reason it is a priority for the G20. not only to simplify payments, but also to boost global trade, right? When we look at all the different payment modes that have recently sprung up, you will see that there are less of high value transactions, but there are a lot of low value, high volume transactions, as we call it, right? It's something like people who are buying, who are maybe something in somewhere in Canada, buy something from China, right? These are all very small pieces of it. And that's the reason we see that if we are able to standardize payments, then it is going to impact all the different financial domains between in the financial industry, because everybody deals with payments. It is not just retailers, or it is not just the wholesale banks or the correspondent banks that we are talking about over here, right? Now, at the same time, what we also see is the payments data, which is critical as part of the whole evolution, as part of the whole journey, if we call it as, right? And the whole digital innovation, when we see it, is based on data. There are a lot of regulations that are coming in as part of AML, as part of sanction screening. Where is the payment coming in from? Where is the payment? Who is the receiver? If we look at the current messaging standards, then it doesn't have that much capability to pass on the message or store that much information in a message set. And most of these message sets, as you may be aware of, is the ISO 8583, or it is something like ISO 15022 that most banks use in cross-border payments and in the financial industry as such. So this is so data becomes the main driver over here. And it is collected, in all the different forms, as simple as a person swiping their card in a store, to contextual payments that we are looking at in the future. It can be something like request to pay that is still coming up, or it is also something like request to pay cross borders, right? This is something like, if I may explain that, that is someone like, as of date, there is an invoice that is being sent from one company A to company B to release the payment. And it takes a lot of time. But if we look at instant payments, it is and adding on top of it is the request to pay that we're talking about, right? So as a company A, I can request company B to pay an amount, and that amount gets credited to me instantly. The reason for that instantaneous behavior of a payment is because of the rich data that is part of the payment. It is what is the full information of remitter, the full information of beneficiary, what is the remitting information as part of the payment. It not only solves the reconciliation issues, but also the sanction screening. And that is where we are talking about the frictions that are going to get eliminated by the implementation of ISO 20022 over a period of time, right? So why ISO 20022? Why not any other standard that the industry wanted to look at? So if we look at standards, there's a convergence that is happening, that is taking place in the financial industry. And this is all towards ISO 20022. A lot of people do not know that there are more than 10 different financial standards in the financial industry, right? And they're very different compared to when we compare each of them side by side. And ISO 20022, what it does is, it is not just a language. It is what you can see is, ISO 20022 is not just a messaging standard. It is a recipe to make financial standards. So you can use the same language, but within your card payments, you can use the same language within your cross-border payments, instant payments, high value, low value payments, or even for your regulatory reporting. And because it's of an XML structure, the amount of data that goes into it simplifies the messaging between banks. It drives interoperability because every bank has something to get out of those data sets, rather than going through the whole request for information process, delaying the process of reconciliation, or actually the funding finally being credited into the into the beneficiary account. Right now, ISO 20022 is not something it is that new. It's quite an old standard. It is just that it took a long time to get implemented, and it is still taking a lot of time. There is a lot of pushback from the institutions to implement ISO 20022. It was first brought into the system back in 1998. A lot of people believe that it was 2004, but the fact is, it is back in 1998 that the 20022 was first introduced into the market. The initial idea was to upgrade the ISO 15022 and implement it as 15022 plus. But over a period of time, the standards guys, the teams realized, okay, we cannot accommodate all the different data sets into the old school HTML piece, right? And that is what 15022 was based on. Quite a few different experience failed, and finally in 2004, ISO 20022 was introduced into the market. Even then, there was not a lot of uptake. Europe was one of the first geographies that started implementing ISO 20022 as part of their whole SEPA program. But even then, it wasn't implemented because a lot of banks were not ready to implement unless and until there was a push, a regulatory push from their local infrastructures, or if I may say, there were a set of banks that did implement, and there were a set of banks that did not implement, right? And banks that have already implemented ISO 20022, they were way ahead of the game, right? Because they had control of the data, what is coming in. And these, you may notice that most of these banks are the private banks that implemented ISO 20022 back then. Now, over a period of time in 2015, 2016, market infrastructures came together and they decided, okay, this is the right time to implement, to mandate ISO 20022 implementation. And this is purely because of the data, the regulatory policies that were changing around the world, right? People are now talking about digital identities, they're talking about instant payments, and the old school messages cannot support it. So it became a very strong reason to implement ISO 20022. The initial deadlines for ISO 20022 was back in 2018. However, those deadlines were pushed, moved into 19, 20, and in the past few years, we have also seen a lot of, just November, just last month, we saw that SWIFT has postponed their ISO go live to March 2023 because a lot of banks were still not ready to implement. In this whole period of migration, what SWIFT did is they agreed to introduce a coexistence period between the banks, within the infrastructure as such, so that there is no disruption of payments, there is no disruption of what is currently in the network, right? And that is purely because there is a lot of remittances in the international market. There's trades that is dependent on the back of this messaging standard, right? And it just sits in the back end and it just does all the job. if the messaging standard goes wrong, what we are effectively talking about is the trades being disrupted, the remittances that a lot of migrant workers send money back to their homes, that gets disrupted. The economies get disrupted. So it needs careful planning. It is not just a IT change. It is not just implementing some solution and moving from whatever the legacy language bank was in to the new ISO, right? In Europe, for that matter, the European Central Bank has been trying to implement it as a big bank, right? So there is no cutover, but it's only SWIFT was like, okay, let us go ahead with a coexistence period. It gives banks that space to move from their current messaging standard to ISO 20022 or some flavor of it over a period of time before the cutoff of 2025. And there are quite a few different tools available also in the market. Right? As you can see, I mean, obviously there are a lot of reserve currencies that are adopting ISO 20022, and this is across the world. It can be, if it is to be understood, it can be as simple as if the banks do not implement ISO 20022, eventually they are going to lose their clients at some stage because they will not be in this whole space of payments. They will not be able to consume the data, process the data, or move that data into the network. And that is where the failure is going to begin. So if the banks want to be relevant, if financial institutions have to be relevant, what they have to start doing is looking at their messaging standards, analyzing the processes that they have based on the current messaging standards, and work to digitize it, work to automate how much ever they can on the basis of data. Now, as I mentioned a couple of minutes back, it is why ISO is being adopted. What are the different factors? Though there are quite a few, what I am highlighting over here is just top 5. And one of the key reasons is obviously the richness of the data. So what we are looking over here is, why is the industry adopting ISO 20022? As I've mentioned a couple of times, it is all about the data that comes in as part of ISO 20022. The most important bit of the whole migration that the institutions involved in the journey must understand is the implementation, the migration is just not limited to payments as a domain. It is not just limited to cross-border payments. Within payments, the impact is going to be over a period of time across on cross-border payments. Within the in-country high-value payments, low-value payments, instant payments, there'll be new methods that will come in as part of the whole ISO 20022 journey. When we say a new method, you can also look at all the different experiments that the central banks are currently working on, that is in the CBDC space. You will see that even with central bank digital currencies, at the back of it, there is a ISO 20022 message, a PAX 008 that gets generated. So what we are effectively looking at, reusing the components, reusing the messaging layer over the period of time. So that is just limited to the payment side. But on a broader perspective, you will see that same impact is going to be on trade. It is going to be on securities. In fact, by the mid of next year, you will see the industry actually starting to discuss the impact of ISO on trades and securities, and how it is going to impact all the different aspects, all the new technologies that are coming in, say artificial intelligence, how the data can be used for machine learning, right? And also, in fact, for distributed ledger, because it's the same language, same data that is going to be reused over a period of time, right? And all this will end up into something like hyper-connected payments or contextual payments, if I may say that, right? It is more data. As a consumer, it is more, as the more data comes into the network, the payment types, the new payment products that are going to get introduced, they are going to be customized, they are going to be personalized, right? It is just going to go beyond that. It's going to impact regulatory reporting. It's going to impact open banking, right? They're all different ways in which ISO is going to get impact. And looking at the future market infrastructures, I have decided that, okay, this is the way we have to go. And these are the reasons why we have to adopt ISO 20022. Okay. As I did mention, it is not just a messaging standard. It is a recipe for the bank. It's a methodology as such. How do you develop a common messaging standard, having a business dictionary linked to it? And because it's neutral, it's globally available, it's open, and it can be implemented across all the different domains, all the different new technologies that are coming in, making it easier to understand, making it where we are talking about implementation of standardized APIs, where the APIs can be reused. If you currently look at the whole API industry, especially in the financial world, is every market has its own design format, and there is not much of reuse as such of APIs. But if we have the language in place, then we are talking about standardized APIs that are going to get implemented over a period of time. That simplifies a lot of other different future solutions, future products that are going to come in. So when we talk about all the data, what exactly is this data? How is it different? Till date, what the industry is used to or has access to is the unstructured data. Unstructured data is limited. It carries limited information, and what it does, it creates friction in the network, delaying payments. What you see exactly over here on the left-hand side is the field 50 of the MT103, where we are talking about. Now, these stats are from Swift. What most banks use or are used to is the unstructured option. Most of them do not use a structured option of data that is being that Swift tried to implement as part of MT. And this is the field 59 that is beneficiary customer. So you can see there is very less usage when it comes to the field 59F. Field 59, so all the different, the 50A, 50F, 50K, they are different, how do you say, the codes or the tags within an empty message that define what amount of information can you feed in to the message. Because field 50K is the most unstructured option, it's easy to implement. Banks do that. Banks do implement it. And there has been a lot of friction in the market, in the network, as we are aware of. And it also creates, I mean, as you can see on my slides, there are quite a few different challenges because of the limited data, remittance information, complicating the reconciliation part, right? And it also complicating the regulatory reporting part, because everything is, end of the day, again, stored as a blob. It is unstructured, so it cannot be extracted, it cannot be leveraged, it cannot be used for any sort of analysis as such. This gives us an idea of what the structural differences of the message. I'm sure you must have come across this. in all the different slides, all the different materials that is available on the internet. This on the left hand side is the old school empty, very small message with limited information in it. On the right hand side, what you see is the ISO structure of the message. It has a header, it has an envelope, how the business document is stored, and under the business document, what is the app header? What does the document carry? This is the actual payload that we are actually talking about. And this is where the data is actually going to fit in. If you have to really compare how the message looks like, this is how the message is going to look like. This is the old school MD103, where we are talking about a lot of unstructured data that's going to come in. You see 50K, you have a name, address, that is it, right? And when you look at the field 59, that is the 59 details, you see that most of the information is not structured. But in an ISO message, it comes in very clearly because every element has a clear name that can be read, and it drives the machine learning component over here. There's a clear name, a postal address, a street name, what is a building name, and so on, right? So what it brings in more structure. It brings in more structure to the data that was available or maybe unavailable in most cases. A little bit of more deep dive and we'll see how it enables better client experience, because we are talking about interoperable payment schemes. You must be aware of how payment schemes across borders are linking up now in the especially in Southeast Asia. If you look at it, it has Malaysia and Singapore have linked their payment system, so a customer can basically use their Malaysian ringgits in Singapore. Or if I'm traveling from India to Singapore, I can use INR in Singapore. And this is all real time. I can not only just use the currency, but these transactions are real time. The money gets is deducted from my account in real time. The reconciliation also happens in real time. There's better compliance in place. There's efficiency in terms of how the data is moved. The friction, right? How the friction is removed. And because of that, we have a better customer experience over a period of time. While most financial institutions have started their ISO journey, in our discussions with banks, what we are very clear in asking them is, in your ISO journey, how do you see yourself? And I have jotted down a few questions over here for the audience to go through so that they can structure their ISO program over a period of time. It is not a IT program. It is not just a regulatory program. The future of the bank depends on how they implement ISO, how they are going to take it forward, right? What is your strategy for ISO adoption? What are the different initiatives, or how are you coordinating? If it is a large bank, how is it being coordinated within the bank? Has the bank looked at the operational challenges, the technological challenges within the bank? Is it going to be the same flavor of ISO messages that they are going to implement? There are quite a few different questions around it. It can be a tactical solution where banks can implement a translator as such. They do not have to rip and replace their whole payment system, implement a new payment system. That is not going to solve your problem. What you can do is you can leverage tactical solutions where you're implementing, say, a translator that converts the message from your existing payment standard, whichever payment standard you're using. It can be proprietary, it can be empty. You translate those messages into ISO back and forth. But at the same time, if you're using a smart database that can store all the rich information, what it's going to do is you are able to reduce the cost of your ISO migration over a period of time. Most of the vendors, what they do in the market currently is they will advise financial institutions to just replace your payment system. Replacing payment system doesn't solve the problem, and it is not only that it is very costly, right? It can run into millions, and it is a year-on-year upgrade that keeps going on. But if you implement any tactical solution, what it does is it gives you the liberty to customize your workflows internally, to get used to the whole ISO messaging over a period of time, that you do not have to upfront put in or invest $500,000 upgrading your current systems or upgrading your whole architecture as such. I am aware of tier 1 banks that started their journey to upgrade their systems, but they have stopped at midway, realizing the amount of work that is going to come in with that. And they have jumped back into tactical solutions, considering all the different aspects of the migration, all the different challenges that are going to come in with the ISO migration. Okay, so sorry, any questions? If you do have, please. And I have just a couple of slides after this. I will show how and what we do within the space and how do we simplify the whole migration.
Go ahead, Akhil. Is very interesting. So, I mean, unless Ayhan and Rick have some questions, I'll leave them to them.
Not a question, more so maybe a comment. And you brought up some excellent points around standardization, and something you said is that if you don't adopt a standard, you might not be able to do business with people moving forward, right?
Yeah.
And a good example that came to mind in the blockchain world last week, we had some disappointing news that one of the bigger supply chain solutions was closing down, which is TradeLens, and we had some subsequent discussions with some folks at TradeLens who mentioned that indeed, when bigger banks and bigger shippers and bigger importers were looking at digitizing themselves, most of their infrastructure, including the banks, were good to support this transition from a paper bill of lading, for example, or a paper letter of credit to something digital. But it's the smaller banks who were struggling, right? They didn't have the resources, or didn't have the infrastructure, or didn't have, to your point, the standards to adopt a digital transformation for their shipping documents. So would ISO 20022 be a vehicle for these smaller banks to move forward their digitization, at least from a supply chain perspective? Letters of credits, bills of lading, transportation documents, right? There's so much information that passes from an exporter to a carrier, to the banks, to the importers, to customs, to everybody else. It's going to be important to indeed standardize these bits of information between our data silos.
Absolutely. I mean, so the current day challenge, the ground level challenge, if we look at what are the basic challenges that market infrastructures or the banks are looking at in implementing ISO, is banks are still very dependent on the legacy structures, legacy architectures, what are in place, and that is not going to change overnight, right? Implementing blockchain within a bank, say for a tier 3 down bank, it can be a lot of challenge for them, because most of the banks are not API ready. In fact, what we are looking at as part of our whole analysis of the ISO journey is even the tier 1 banks are not ready with the APIs, right? Because there is no standardization within APIs itself. And banks again do not want to invest where they cannot get value out of it. So ISO over a period of time becomes a driver, because banks can then strategize how they are going to implement the same language in all their different entities, how they are going to leverage the language for APIs, how do you standardize the language, how do you reuse the data that is going to come into the network, right? Though, in fact, most banks, most conversations that you will come across is ISO is going to do some sort of magic with structured data. No, it's not going to be like that. It's the same data, it's just that it's going to come structured, right? But there is some back-end work that banks must do before they get into the structured piece of it. So I'll give an example. We have been working with a bank in Europe. And these guys have been forward-looking how to leverage the rich data. Okay? So what they have started doing is they have started analyzing the data what they have in their CRMs, in their core banking. Okay. And what we are helping them do is structure their current data into a data that is ISO ready in future, right? As simple as this can be funny. There's the client addresses that is available in the CRM. If you look at client addresses in CRM, that is very unstructured, right? It is all about the input, the information that has gone into the system during onboarding, right? And because it's a manual feed, most of the information is unstructured. So what the bank is doing now, pick up the unstructured addresses, structure it and store it so that when the payment is processed, there is no time lag at the core banking end. At the same time, what they can do is they can improve their sanction screening list, their AML list, right? Most banks haven't even thought about it. Most of the banks are just still struggling, trying to figure out what do we do with ISO, and trying to cook up some dreams that ISO is going to change. So like, it's not a genie, it's not going to change anything overnight. There's a lot of work involved over a period of time in that. What we are doing here is, you will see Nth Exception has last year we launched a data hub. From this illustration, you see there are multi-format systems. There is all the disparate data sources that are sitting. This is all the unstructured data that is sitting within the current architecture of a bank. We take it, we push it. It can be anyone. Primarily, we use Kafka. Standardize it, structure it, and this becomes your master record within the bank. You can use this same master record, or you can push this data back into your systems. So what it does is the information that you currently have within your system, within your architecture, it becomes structured over a period of time. Out of the box, the data hub does is there is a ground level problem of data truncation. So when the messages get transformed from all the different standards into ISO, or ISO into different standards, there is a data loss that is going to happen. And this data loss can create issues for the financial institutions in terms of regulatory adherence, in terms of regulatory reporting, and also sanction screening. Nucleus, what it does out of the box is it allows the banks to have that information without any truncation. In fact, we are working with Swift that we become an ancillary provider for for Swift in terms of data. And this is going to be like a distributed system that is going to sit under the transaction management platform. Right. So and
that's indeed that is indeed the most important side, transaction management platform.
Yes.
That's really going to be a real game changer in the coming years.
Yes.
And I hope to see that's the great, and that's my dream indeed. And I know that it will come and it will come clear, and everyone will understand one day that how that platform will bring so many additional benefits. And that's one of the greatest way to reach to the clients, direct clients by the Swift, and that's the great options. And I would like to thank you, Akhil, for your kind presentation. And all I can tell you, I have no more questions. All I can to add 1 or 2 points. ISO really is a great project, and really a great project. And every institution in a supply chain as a stakeholder should pay and must pay a kind of the attention how that ISO would bring the benefit on their ERP systems. All I can tell you that what we have been talking about the ordering customer and the beneficiary customer. Yeah. Let's think about the details of the payment. Let's think about the purpose of the payment. Those will be standardized, which means that info will be able to flow like money from point A to point B. Today, we are only moving the money from point A from point B. But tomorrow, we will definitely move the info, adding with the value that the ISO will bring us a chance to move the info from beneficiary to from importer to exporter, from exporter to the importer. That's the great challenge, and that's one of my big dreams to see. And I would like to thank you once again for all your great presentation, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Ayhan. Thank you. So, yep, that's it from me. There is the other product set that we have is sorry, I didn't cover is we also have a message management where the banks are looking at managing the Swift messages. Banks can create messages manually. They can have the whole message management in place. This is something again what we do out of the box. But this is again limited to Swift, though we plan to extend it to different providers, MasterCard, Visa, and so over a period of time as the time moves. So yes, if anybody has any questions from the audience, you can always drop in a note to our generic mailbox. One of us is going to reply, and hope we are able to solve the problem.
So they can contact you directly on your email?
Yes.
Awesome.